My name is Carrie Boley, and I'd like to welcome you to the first in a series of our HR Alliance educational sessions for HR professionals on people analytics. I serve as the co-chair for the HR Alliance Communications Committee, and I'm the vice president of talent management at Peraton in Reston, Virginia. With me today is Dr. Fiona Jamieson. Fiona brings 25 years of experience conducting research and providing solutions to organizations with specific expertise in employee engagement, employee relations, and people analytics. She's well known for her ability to translate complex data into easy to understand insights that can improve business performance. Her organization, Spring International, serves mid to large size organizations in retail, logistics, manufacturing, transportation, healthcare, and biotech. Fiona has a PhD in human resource management from the University of Bristol and was an honorary research fellow for the University of Wolverhampton. She's a regular guest speaker at NYU, Villanova, and Temple University, and is actively involved with leading HR think tank organizations such as the Wharton Research Advisory Group. She currently sits on the board of POWER, a Philadelphia-based organization committed to all professionals, especially women and those who identify as women. She serves as the DEI chair for the National Association of Women Business Owners and sits on the senior advisory board for Fox Business School at Temple University. Outside of work, she's the mom of 2 teenagers. Welcome, Fiona.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We wanted to do this series for HR professionals because many of us don't have a strong background in areas like math and statistics, technology. But in today's environment, understanding data and being able to make data-driven decisions is becoming increasingly important. So in this first of our People Analytics series, we wanted to set the stage and understand the business case for people analytics. So I know we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Could you provide, an overview of what people analytics is, what it entails, and it's important in today's business landscape?
So that's a great question. And you're right. Most people get into HR because they love dealing with people and solving problems. And they typically don't get into people analytics because it's math and data and analytics, and it's a bit scary for some people. But people analytics is really about understanding the power of people and using data to improve business performance. So looking at information to make better, more informed, evidence-based decisions. And so many of the decisions that we make today in business should be a combination of data and experience. And so people analytics is just bringing in that people component. And one of the things that, I often get asked is, so why should we care? What should we be doing about people analytics? There's so many business cases for actually doing this about, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about as we think about business case. So the first case is really about improving talent acquisition. If you can use data to improve who you're hiring, how you're hiring them, and what does a great hire look like? So leveraging data to make better hiring decisions. You can also use it to improve the employee experience. Like what kind of experience are employees having on the job, getting their feedback, learning, what they love about their work, what gets in the way of them being productive. Streamlining through training and training evaluations, reducing turnover and attrition, understanding why it is that people leave your organization and what causes them to do so. Also, bringing data and people analytics into your organization just makes a lot more information accessible to your leaders through your HR business partners. If they have access to HRIS data, bringing that information to light so they can make better decisions. Can also improve processes. How do we work? What's the most efficient process? Where are there roadblocks? Enhancing productivity. And it really does help HR have a seat at the executive table.
That is what we're always striving for.
It really is a way to kind of have that seat at the table and be able to talk the language to the other executives, which comes down to, dollars and cents.
This feels like a lot to take on. Where do you start?
So I think there's a lot of different things that you can do to start people analytics in your organization. Once you understand kind of what it is that you want to learn, the best first step, I think, is understanding where you sit. You know,
Yeah.
how comfortable do you feel with analytics? There's actually three types of people typically when it comes to HR analytics. And this came out of the Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago. And I think it's really relevant to how most of us feel in HR about data. You're either analytically savvy, right? You've probably had some training on data. Maybe you did it at college, or maybe you've taken some courses. There's analytically willing, which is people who kind of want to get into it, but they don't really know where to start. Possibly a lot of the people watching this podcast today. And then, those who are a little bit skeptical. They think, I've got a ton of experience. I don't need data to tell me what I need to know. And understanding where you are is a really good first step of getting to know yourself, right? Where do I identify? And so, if you're sitting here watching this now, figure out where you are and how you identify. Most people are analytically willing, right? And so they want to
Yeah.
learn some new steps. And this is kind of the conversation we're having today about what can we do in order to get ourselves comfortable. The second thing you also need to understand is kind of where's your organization, right? How sophisticated is our organization? A lot of companies, say they do people analytics, but they really don't. And so having a think about where your organization is today, and this is a maturity model that I often talk to people about and say, kind of, where's your organization? Reactive is the lowest level, right? Which is where you probably collect some data. Maybe you do an annual employee survey. Maybe you're collecting customer service or patient satisfaction data. But it's sort of isolated. You maybe don't have access to it. There's different parts of the organization that are doing different things, but it's not coordinated. The next level is proactive. Maybe you're starting to collect data, you're starting to have it talk to one another, you're looking at the relationships between your data and maybe some benchmarks, like how do we compare to others? Strategic level is where you've started to align it to decisions you're making. How many people do we need to hire? What's the best hiring source? Who are we losing? Why are we losing them? And you're starting to ask questions of the data. And then the most sophisticated is your predictive level, which is where companies are sort of doing scenario planning. 5 years from now, who do we need to be hiring? How do we need to build different parts of our organization? So understanding where your organization is can also help you figure out what's the first thing we should do. Because the first thing you could do could be get all our ducks in a row, like see what data we have available to us.
Yeah.
So identifying where your organization is on this, most people sit somewhere between reactive and proactive.
Yeah. And I think, if you could, can you go back to the previous slide?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in addition to understanding where you are, most of our HR teams are probably a blend of those three different types.
Mm-hmm.
I know in my organization, we have some people that are very savvy, and we've got some people that I don't know that they're resistant, but are probably just unsure, somewhere between resistant and willing. They're
Mm-hmm.
unsure of what to make of the data, how to use it, maybe a little bit even intimidated. So I think understanding where your team is, the people that you work with, those who who you collaborate with on a daily basis, kind of getting a sense of that is probably important too. So who who those who you partner with on a daily basis, maybe get a sense of where they are as well.
Yeah.
And then if you going back to the next slide to the maturity model, I love this where I love maturity models in general. So so getting a sense of where your organization is and knowing where you sit will probably give you a great platform to talk with the leaders in your HR organization to start to have the conversation about people analytics if you haven't done so already. And if you've already had that conversation, this is probably something that you can use to start to chart a path of, where you want to go next. Just like a really great tool or something like this to use as you think about, what your people analytics strategy might look like.
Exactly. And it's sometimes helping to know where you're going. Like, what could this bring our organization to know, otherwise it's like, where are we going with this? What is it going to help us to solve? But having a maturity model in that conversation, I think helps companies to say, all right, this is where we could be. It's not going to be this year necessarily, right? Maybe it's a 5 year.
Right.
And
Exactly.
organizations, yeah, that we've worked with over the years, it can be 3 to 5 years before they get to that sophisticated level where they have a team in-house who's doing it. Up until that point, there may be subject matter experts that you have to pull into your organization to kind of ramp you up to that more sort of sophisticated level.
So then when you go back to for example, if you were to go back to the metrics that you had in the first slide, then you can start to prioritize what are those metrics that are going to be most important to your organization, because they're all good, but you may not need all of them at the same time. Some of them may be more important than others. And then you look at this maturity model, and then you can start to think about, okay, so, first we're going to focus on, this set of metrics, then this, as you start to become more mature as an organization, you can start to align those metrics to your maturity, maybe focusing on those that are, going to be the most relevant and the most important to, how you do business and what your business is.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that actually leads us into a great conversation about, what are some of the skills and competencies that you would need? If you're going to go into people analytics, what is that going to look like? And so, this has been a field that's been growing for a while. There was a study done years ago by GE, and they looked at how can we best distribute our employee relations team. And it took them years and years to do it. And it was published in 1955 in the Harvard Business Review. So this has been around for a while, but there are more reasons today. CEOs care about it, right? We've got more tools that we've ever had before in terms of surveying tools and data analysis tools and models and things that we can pull together. So stuff that used to take years to do is now something that can be done much more efficiently with less resources than was done in the past. And I think it's really important to think about who might be on that team and what skills do they have. And I'm sure there's people listening who are going to say, like, what are some of the skills that we need, and who do we need on that team?
So how do you most of us, again, and I'm not going to say everyone, I think about it from the perspective of the HR professionals that I know, who I network with, and even those in my company. How should we be transitioning to, changing our skill sets to be more focused on people analytics? We still have our quote unquote day jobs, whether it's talent acquisition, talent management, HR business partners. But how do we acquire? What should we be thinking about when acquiring more skills around people analytics?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer it in two ways. The first way, I'm going to talk about who's typically on the team and what skills do they have. So you can sort of identify where does HR fit into that and the skills that we already have. And then I'm going to talk about the different skills that we want to build over time. So there's typically 4 kinds of folks that are involved in people analytics. The first one is your data architect, right? That's someone who can pull data together. They're building databases. They're putting data into some kind of infrastructure so you can ask questions of it. That's typically not going to be your HR person, right? Unless you
Right.
want to
Yep.
change track. Right? That's usually
Right.
a data scientist, probably sitting in
Yeah.
your IT group somewhere. Then there's the workforce scientist. That's someone who, understands statistics, maybe understands how to ask the right questions, usually has an HR or social science background. That could be a strong HR person. Maybe they have some IO psychology that they've done, or they just have a strong interest in research. Then there's the workforce behavior expert. This is typically someone who is designing the questions we ask of people. So if you're doing a culture study or a work-life balance or benefits survey, that's the person who's saying, how do we ask these questions so we get the right answers? And then the role that I think is truly made for the HR expert is this sort of what I call the interpreter or translator. It's someone who kind of understands these other roles, but they're the one that act as a change agent. They're the person who pulls all that information together, translates it into insights, and then convinces business leaders, this is why we need to do it this way. So those skills we already have in HR. You understand the business strategy.
Yep.
You're a change agent in all the work that you do. You already have a lot of these skills. You just kind of need to get a bit more savvy in those other 3 roles to understand what they do. So when you look at the skills required for people analytics, I put together a list for you because I figured it might be useful for people to take a look and say, okay, what do I have today and what am I maybe missing? If you want to go into actually running analysis and doing things like, looking at your engagement results and looking at correlations between different data, you're probably going to need a little bit more data analysis skill base. So familiarity with programming, data visualization, understanding how to take data and make it really interesting, right? And take complex models and be able to say, here's the 3 insights that we have. It's that change agent piece. And then some familiarity with SPSS or Excel or some of the programming tools. That's if you want to go heavy into the data side. The
Right.
side is really stuff that HR already has, right? It's understanding some HR knowledge. What are we trying to do? How are we trying to hire? How are we trying to engage and manage our talent? Business acumen, right? Understanding how those HR decisions align to what we do as a business. If we're growing, we need more talent. If we're shrinking, how do we retain the talent we have and manage performance? Critical thinking, like understanding the trends, staying ahead of what's coming and what's new. Problem solving, right? We're losing people on the night shift. Why is that? So the
Right.
ability to ask those like critical problem solving questions. Most of these skills HR folks have already.
Exactly. We're already using them, and so it looks like taking our existing skills, but using them in a different way, applying, looking at the data through a different lens than maybe we've done it before,
Mhm.
but having a lot more data than maybe we've had previously because we've got more systems now, more ways to get data. So it's looking at all this data and being able to maybe cull through that data a little bit differently than what we've had before, but also maybe having, if you look above the line there, maybe having some individuals that help us do that so that we're
Mhm.
focusing on the data that's most important as opposed to, looking at data for the sake of having data,
Yeah.
because that
Well,
can, that can happen as well. But I think, as you said here, these are all things that we all have these skills. It's applying them a little bit differently, maybe using a slightly different muscle than what we've done up to this point.
yeah. And one of the most critical skills I always say when to students, I teach a lot of students at different universities here around, how do I improve my skills around people analytics? The number one skill I think we have is coming at the data with a question. Right? If you just have a
Yeah.
ton of data, like you can get lost in it and go down rabbit holes. But if you come at the data with a very clear question, like why are we losing people? Or, are women leaving the organization faster than men? Or, you know, why are we losing people at 90 days versus
Right.
3 years? So if you come at the data with a very specific question, that helps you to understand what data do I need to look at?
Yeah.
You know, how long is this? Do I need to look at it for a year? Do I need to look at it for 3 years? Do I need to compare groups, men versus women? Do I need to compare locations? Our HQ site versus our field sites. So coming at data with a very clear questions enables you almost immediately to eliminate a lot of information. And the more you
Right.
can focus in and eliminate the noise, the clearer you're going to get to an answer. So I think that's a very critical skill. And most people, especially in HR, who may have had some experience with investigations, for example, they know how to ask good questions. So it's just targeting those questions at your data to eliminate the noise. And I think we tend to forget we have that skill. We just haven't applied it in this area before.
What are some ways to help us sharpen the saw there?
So I think there's a lot of ways. And one of the questions we had talked about before this was, what are some of the tools and resources out there for HR professionals? And this is a bit of an eye chart, so I apologize to anybody, but we share the deck and information afterwards. There's numerous sources for upping these skills, and they range from sort of online courses that you can get in for free, whether it be through LinkedIn Learning or Coursera. There's books you can read. Like the ones I often recommend are sort of kind of getting you comfortable with statistics, but in a very friendly way, right? They're not intimidating. Like Naked Statistics, for example, uses it sort of talks about how we use statistics in everyday life and we don't even think about it. It's just part of the decisions we make. And then there's webinars and workshops. SHRM provides, numerous workshops on people analytics that you can attend. There's online platforms that you can leverage. If you just simply even Google and YouTube, like People Analytics Beginner 101, you're going to find a plethora of things that you can watch and listen. And there's a lot of open source material out there that's available if you're willing to kind of, do a little Google search and find it. But this will help give you kind of a foundation of getting comfortable with the data piece of it. What does good data look like? What things should I be thinking about? The ethical considerations that we have with data.
Fiona, thank you so much for all of that great insight and information that you shared with us today. I think it's very inspiring, and hopefully our listeners will use that information and use that as a way to invest in their own development when it comes to people analytics. That wraps up our first in our series. Join us next month when we will talk about leadership buy-in and alignment and privacy and ethical concerns when it comes to people analytics. Thanks again, Fiona.
Thanks. It was great to be here.